Okay, everyone, we are live. So I'm going to share our presentation for today, which will kind of educate everyone, and it'll have what we're going to do today on that presentation. Okay, so thank you all for coming to the Washington High School Student Support Panel. Now, this is the first of hopefully more that we can have in the future, and this is hosted by Washington ASB and the student advocacy group Gen Up Fremont. Just some panel info. Today is August 7th. The panel will be from 1 to 3 p.m. The purpose is to listen to student testimonials and discuss solutions and preventative measures we as a school can take to improve our learning environment. For testimonials, students have shared their stories to us through an anonymous form, and student representatives from ASB and Gen Up will be reading them today. More on student testimonials, there are 5 categories: racial discrimination, homophobic harassment, political matters, microaggressions, and mental health, and others. Action items. So after some sections and categories, we are going to discuss some action items and other solution that anyone brings up. In regards to names, any references to teacher and student names, political views, personal information, and gender identities won't be revealed, but we do have all the responses on record. And all submissions have been vetted by a counselor as well. Moving on to community guidelines, first and foremost, everyone should treat each other and every submission with respect and value. And we're going to be using the raise hand feature today. So if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature just so that no one interrupts each other and we can all go in an orderly fashion. So if we could test that out right now, that would be great. You can raise your hand by clicking on participants below and then clicking raise hand.
So first off, I want everybody to introduce themselves. So I'll be calling off a list and I'll call on your name and just introduce yourself, what your role is in this panel. And yeah, we'll just go from there. So the first person on my list is Rebecca.
Hi, so I'm Rebecca. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am a new science teacher at Washington. So this will be my first year there.
Awesome. So the next person is Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Donahue. I am one of the assistant principals at Washington High School.
The next person is Walter Lewis.
Hello, I'm Walter Lewis. I'm the principal of Centerville. I've been here 2 years. This is my 3rd year here.
Awesome. Ann Crosby.
Hi, my name is Ann Crosby. My pronouns are she, her, and I go by Ms. And I'm a school board trustee.
Awesome. Jeff Speckles.
Hi, my name is Jeff Speckles. I'm an assistant at Washington High School.
Joanne Garbarini.
Okay. All right. Oops, sorry. Hi, I'm Joanne Garbarini. I'm a teacher at Washington High School.
Michael Bortz.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael Bortz, usually just known as Bortz, and I teach assorted sciences at Washington High.
Lauren.
Lauren Sanpan-Machan, a resource teacher at Washington and the emotional intelligence coordinator.
Nathania.
Nathania Cheney-Aiello, assistant principal at Washington, she, her pronouns.
Robert Moran.
I am Bob Moran, principal at Washington High School.
Sarah Lowe.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lowe. I'm the ASB vice president. My pronouns are she, hers.
Srinidhi Madhu.
Hi everyone, my name is Trinity. I'm going to be a sophomore next year at Washington High School, and I'm the regional anchor of Gen Up.
Zach Larson.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Larson. I'm the Director of Secondary Education for Fremont Unified.
Kenneth.
Hey everyone, my name is Kenneth and I am serving as the ASB treasurer of Washington High School this year, and I am also another regional anchor for Juneau.
Andrea.
Hi everyone, Andrea Madrinian. I'm one of the school counselors at Washington High School.
And lastly but not least, Abhi.
Hello everyone, my name is Abhi Shiva. I'm an incoming senior and the ASB president of Washington High School. I think that's everyone. Great, so we can now move on to our first category of student testimony, which will be racial discrimination. Our first entry is from a 10th grader. While in second period, I was talking with my friends and my classmate was sitting a couple seats away talking with their friends. During their conversation, my classmate said, "Yes, my slave, do as I say before I whip you." I heard it, but didn't think much of it because it wasn't my business what they talked about. However, when they said my name, I asked them to repeat what they said. They said I shouldn't say that around you because it is a sensitive topic for you people. I asked what they meant by you people, and they said, you know, the ghetto and dangerous type of people, the Black people. I simply turned away, not wanting to deal with ignorance. Our next submission is from a 12th grader. It was 5 of us. We all got seated in the back, and we were usually all grouped together. We were the few Latinx people in the class. This teacher pointed to all of us and called us potheads. The teacher said every time they passed through the back, they smelled pot. The teacher then proceeded to say, specifically from the potheads in the back, and pointed at us. I can assure you, we do not carry that on us ever. We all were confused and asked if the teacher meant us, and the teacher ignored us and continued the lesson. The teacher had made racist remarks against Latinx students before, but when telling a vice principal, the teacher was given a talk. I can't help but believe that the pothead comment was racially motivated. The teacher had already had us separated from the rest of the class and had said racist remarks before, and told us that we were too sensitive. We would have told an admin, but they didn't do anything the first time. The next comment under racial discrimination is from an 11th grader. I've been going to predominantly white schools my whole life, and as a Black female, I often experience ignorance that turns into racism by my peers. I've been told I'm pretty for a Black girl, called the N-word, and made to seem as though somehow me being Black meant I couldn't have good grades or be smart. While not all people get how that might feel, I can say it's not something I wish upon anyone, and think that Washington High School can do a better job of educating its students on different cultures, so students will be less likely to say something disrespectful as a joke.
Okay, so the next section is going to be homophobic harassment. And I just want to give a quick trigger warning. If any of these stories bother you or if any of the words bother you, feel free to exit the panel or exit the live stream. So we're going to begin now. Avi, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so the first is from an 11th grader. There was this group of kids in my math class that would always pick on me and my friend for being bi. They said there's no such thing and we aren't just fully out as gay yet. They would call us names too. My friend wasn't out at the time and I worry these kids scared them out of coming out. Okay, the next testimony is also from an 11th grader. I have heard people around campus use gay as an insult or as a way to describe something in a negative way. I've heard it, even some of my friends use it. But the reason why I don't think this is okay is because gay is used as a negative connotation. It associates gay with a negative connotation too. This is obviously harmful in at least some ways because some queer students feel either very uncomfortable or bad in general. And the next testimony is from a 12th grader. During my freshman year, there were a couple of upperclassmen who would make fun of me and my friend for being bisexual. They would name call him and would say we're just gay but haven't fully come out yet. Our teacher did nothing about this, and it happened at least once a day. At the time, my friend wasn't out yet, and I'm worried those kids scared him of coming out.
So those are our first two sections of testimony, and now we'll be moving on to our first discussion. So the main discussion question is, what solutions can we implement to prevent racism, homophobia, and discrimination as a whole at Washington High School? And some things to think about are, how can we greater educate both students and teachers on this issue? And do any teachers or members have examples of what they do that others could potentially mirror? So just think about that for 15 to 30 seconds and raise your hand when you're ready to share.
Okay, so some people are raising their hands. The first hand I saw was Rebecca's.
Awesome. Hi. I don't know a whole lot about the school yet because I'm new, but I believe I saw that you guys have a GSA club. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be possible, I know we're doing distance learning, but to schedule ways for those like club officers to do kind of like guest lectures, I guess, if you will, in some of our Zoom sessions to teach about like appropriate terminology and the use of the word gay. And just kind of to give a rough overview, because I know a lot of students don't know proper terminology or about pronouns, or maybe they do and they are still disrespectful about it. But also I think a lot of the teachers would benefit from it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Ann Crosby.
Yeah, I love the idea that you'd have conversations with our educators, because it helps them to understand how it feels when you run into situations like this, and hopefully have allies on campus. One of the things that was brought up is when a student may bring to a administrator's attention something that has happened, and then they feel like nothing is done about it. One of the things that some people don't realize is that we are not allowed to report to you any sort of disciplinary action. So there may be disciplinary action that is taking place that you aren't aware of. And what I would suggest is if things continue to happen, you continue to report it. And also I would suggest writing up what has happened to you, presenting it to your administrator and asking them to sign off on it. Keep records of the type of things that you run into. It shows that you're taking it seriously and it's not an idle complaint. The other thing I would say is that I would be hopeful that there would be more opportunities for some restorative practices where you can actually sit down with somebody who has said something unkind and explain to them how it makes you feel and why it's offensive, and hopefully have them understand a little better that it isn't just something nothing, that it really does impact what school feels like for you.
If anybody else would like to raise their hand, feel free to do so. Sorry, I might butcher the name, Miss Song Panapachan.
You're totally fine. You can call me Mrs. Song. So one of the main things that when I hear the term gay or the R word or the N word used in our hallways, I think you have to catch it in the moment. It's not something that you can just kind of let linger or completely ignore it. So catching it in the moment, discussing with that student why it's inappropriate and it's not okay, and also finding out the reason of why they thought that using that word was okay. For example, the word gay, as referenced in one of the testimonials, was that people were using it in a negative connotation. And I think that just kind of reminding them that there's other words that can be used to actually express how they feel, instead of just using a word like that or the R word or the N word. There's other appropriate ways to express how we feel, and to just kind of, I would say, nip it in the bud the moment that you hear it. And then if it continues to report it to admin.
The second hand I saw raised was Mr. Bortz.
Hey, okay, this isn't I usually need a little bit of time to process my thoughts, so this isn't going to come out fully processed. But having been at Washington, I think we need to be like very cognizant of the different backgrounds students are coming from here, and the way we approach racism. Having taught several lessons at Washington High School trying to approach racism, how you have to we have to be cognizant of how what seems anti-racist to one person can seem racist to another person with such a deep. Do you guys get what I'm saying here? Does that kind of make sense? Okay, cool. I taught this whole I taught a whole lesson about how statistics are used to misrepresent people of different ethnicities in the media, and a lot of students from those particular backgrounds felt like I was targeting them, and if that kind of makes sense. So I think if we're going to do this, it needs to be something of this nature. It needs to be very well thought out ahead of time. Does that make sense? And terminologies and intentions need to be very well stated. Just because from my personal experience, it goes sideways very, very, very fast.
Yeah, I completely understand. The third hand I saw was Miss Madronon, if I'm saying that correctly.
Sorry, that was Miss Madrinin.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. It's fine. I think we could do a better job at normalizing when we correct inappropriate behavior, or just individuals on campus. If they're saying something inappropriate, it should be okay to correct them and to kind of educate them. Oftentimes students are scared to call somebody out because of the fear of retaliation or being on the end of that bullying or name calling. So I think that if we could change student climate to where it's okay to call people out and accepting the education behind it, I think that can definitely improve our student climate.
Yeah, I completely agree. Ms. Garbarini?
All right, so one of the things that I've been taking classes on over the summer was for teachers, for the new environment that we're going to be in, and not having the relationship like we did going into second semester. We at least knew the kids in the room. Now we're starting creating community from nothing. And especially I have mostly freshmen. I don't have any former relationship with them. But talking about teachers, in this letter that we've now been asked to send out to parents and students, to introduce ourselves, but even on a deeper level of what will or will not be tolerated in the classrooms. Because some of our conversations may become, teaching social studies, more current than we've been used to. That we talk about what will not be tolerated, racism, homophobia, whatever, that we will respond to. And as teachers, responding in the moment, as Lauren said, it can't be I think it was Lauren, it can't be a wait till later. It needs to be oh, no, this was one of the taboos. We said we weren't gonna, but we can talk about things. Not to break off conversations, because maybe we need to have conversations about racism in the classroom. What is it? And everybody knowing that we are a safe space, that things can be said and we all accept that it really is a safe space, not just, oh, yeah. But to begin to explain ourselves more deeply than most of us are aware, they're used to doing. Okay.
Mr. Moran?
Hi, thank you. So my first thought when I'm hearing these stories is I'd like to share them with staff and with students. I think they really bring a humanity to the topics we're addressing, and they make you more reflective, because I think in general, we all need to be more reflective in our practice in dealing with other humans on this earth. And I agree with Mr. Bortz that if we do a larger piece with staff or with students, it's got to be very well thought out and outlined and specific. And we need to have, goals set so that it is a safe space and safe discussion for everyone. But every time I hear stories, we had the student focus groups a couple years ago, that really brings home that we have a lot of work still to do, and that we're all people and we all deserve respect, and we're not getting that. So thank you.
Mrs. Cheney Aiello.
First, I have to unmute myself. I want to echo what a lot of people have said. This summer, I've taken some of the time to do some additional reading, including the book White Fragility, which really made me, someone mentioned earlier, we need to talk about what is racism. And I think a lot of us who were culturalized as white, myself being very advantaged, I need to be able to look at the fact that even though I might not be consciously or overtly trying to be racist, the fact that I am part of this system and this culture makes me de facto part of that racist system. And that can be something that is very difficult for those of us who have benefited from the system to admit. And so I think that it is something that, as Mr. Bortz and Mr. Moran just said, how we address this is going to be really important, but those difficult conversations absolutely need to be held.
Mr. Moran.
I'm sorry, I didn't take my hand down. I didn't mean to have that happen.
Oh, Ms. Crosby.
Thank you. I think one of the things is if we are making corrections of somebody in a moment, to one, assume good intention, and by that I mean that if you're the person making the correction, how you go about that correction will be whether or not that person responds defensively, in which case the correction doesn't land. They feel defensive and will not be open to what you're trying to help educate them on. So being kind in your how you approach it can be helpful. I don't, there's a big difference, I know, for generations, and I see it with my mother. She would say things that I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you used that term, because things have changed. But then now my own children are educating me, and it's easy to feel defensive about it. I didn't mean that. That's not what I said. I think with Ms. Cheney Aiello was saying, it's easy to feel like you need to defend yourself. But when somebody approaches you with kindness and tries to, have that philosophical discussion, have the conversation about, well, this is why this is this way and why things have changed. It's like, oh, okay, now you've educated me. I can take that on board and feel more confident. Even for somebody who might be defensive in the moment, it allows them the opportunity to think about it when they leave the situation, and you're going to have a better response. The other thing I would say to Bortz's point is, as teachers, we try to make connections with students, and we try to have more personal relationships so that students understand that we care about them, and then they want to learn. And so, and to a really big part of education is letting your students know that you're invested in them. And sometimes what that means is that we can joke and we can say things in attempting to connect, use the new lingo, we're trying to be, on a level, and sometimes that misses. So one, I would say it's important for students to have the respect for a teacher to kindly let them know when things didn't land quite the way probably they meant, and assume good intention, but also for educators to be very careful in what they're doing. And I think it's probably worthwhile at the beginning of a semester to say, you know, I'm going to assume good intentions for you, and I hope you will do me the same favor, and that we can have some earnest conversations and be supportive of one another. I will offer you that opportunity, and I hope you will offer the same to me.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes, thank you. I know I'm a guest at the Washington High School forum here, but I do appreciate having the invite. The only thing I wanted to echo is something Mr. Moran and Ms. Crosby had said before about the way to really change people. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is, if I want a culture of caring and I want a culture of acceptance, education is a very important way to get that. But really, teaching the hearts and minds of people is my number one priority. And I love the ideas of having forums, but also, I think one of the most impactful things that a staff I was on has ever done was to have students from the Black Student Union and the GSA come back and talk to the staff and talk about their own personal experiences. Because although on one level, the staff was really cognizant of a lot of issues, but really having the opportunity to understand the impact of actions was something that really made a difference. So I'm in full support of Mr. Moran's desire to have more of these forums, and I'm thrilled to death that this forum is going on right now. So that's all I really wanted to say, is that those are the ways to change hearts and minds. And I really think that it's important that we not forget we are not only working on the minds of people, but also on the hearts of people to want to change and to want to create those cultures. So very exciting work to me. Thank you.
Ms. Crosby. Oh, Ms. Chenier.
I 100% agree what Mr. Lewis just said. So I don't want this comment to come out as if I'm in disagreement with him, because I raised my hand before he spoke. I think one of the things that we do want to be cognizant of is that we want to hear from our students, we need to hear from our students, but we can't expect our students to be the experts and educate us on all of this. That, your perspectives are unique and super duper important, but that, we as adults, as the staff, also need to take a look at some of the bigger, more structural things to make sure that we can sort of see if there are ways we can address things as more than just a one-off. So I just want to make sure that we don't put all the pressure on our student unions and clubs to, fix the problem for us.
Oh, Mr. Boards.
Hey, I just want to kind of build a little bit off what Nathania said. Once upon a time at a different school with a very different demographic background than Washington. We as a school used to teach, we had a whole unit, and we had a study skills class about racism in the community. And I think with what Nathaniel was saying about really being experts, we should also be cognizant of the fact that it takes a really long time to make progress. Progress comes in little bitty. If you come into this idea with, we're going to take somebody who thinks one thing and completely change their mind and make them think a completely different thing in 3 days, we're going to have a bad time, right? So it's about what are the those research-based steps that help people change their mind, kind of pull them a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. Not try to go from one position completely to the other all at once. As nice as that would be.
I also encourage other students to speak up as well, so you can just use the raise hand feature. So I guess I'll go first. I really like all of these suggestions, and I especially like the suggestion about the GSA club, visiting different classrooms, because I think that would be very useful. I think just an overall tip, at least from a student's perspective, is I hope teachers are more aware, or at least racially aware, in their classrooms, just because I find in a lot of instances that when racism or homophobia does go on, a lot of teachers aren't usually aware of it, even though it's like blatantly obvious it's there. So I just think it would be nice if a teacher could step in and help the students out who are being discriminated against. And I see Kenny's hands raised. Kenny?
Yeah, so I'm really grateful for all the staff and other adults' responses. And I think all of them are really valuable, especially towards our discussion of promoting anti-racism within Washington. I think going back to what Mr. Bort said, of course, like progress is slow, but the important thing is that we take the steps to address it like as soon as possible. And going back to what Ms. Song Panakachan said earlier, I think it's important that as students and as staff, it's important for us to be able to be constantly aware of just all these different internalized racism behaviors, especially using incorrect terms when we're trying to quote unquote insult other people. And so I think it is important to be able to recognize those and then call people out, whether it's teachers or students. And I know a lot of ASB has been talking about this, but we want to be able to share our experiences here today on this panel with the rest of the staff, within Washington High School and with the rest of the district as well, because a lot of what we're discussing here today and a lot of what all the other Gen Up forums are talking about, they're all really good ideas for helping to benefit anti-racism on all FUSC campuses. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. Shrinity's next.
I strongly agree with what all the staff said, especially about the idea of the GSA club. And I feel like we could also do workshops about it. We can do presentation workshops about it, assemblies or something like that. And I feel like we can create support groups on each type of discrimination, because even though you could talk to a counselor or a teacher, you're not going to feel that strong of a connection when you're talking to a support group filled with other students as well, to see they're also experiencing this. I'm not the only one. How can we come to a conclusion?
Sarah?
Hi, first off, I just want to say I'm super grateful for this panel and for all of you guys for showing up and putting your input on the situation. Coming from a student, I think that one thing that we need to be aware of, or especially for the staff and teachers, is that a lot of times when students deal with racism and homophobia in our school, oftentimes they feel like they aren't being heard. So it is a little bit harder for them to reach out to staff, because obviously they may feel like the staff is not going to do much. So it is kind of important for staff, if you see this happening, to step in and kind of take that initiative and make these students feel like they're really being heard and their problems are being addressed. And I also want to say that we definitely should start normalizing this type of the good type of behavior within our classes next year and within our school. So this is the new normal. We need to be aware of other people and be respectful of their identities and who they are. And we need to hold people accountable for their racism or their homophobia. And obviously they may not have bad intentions, but it definitely is a good learning experience to bring it up.
Ms. Song?
So Mr. Moran had a task force with some of the staff earlier this week, and we discussed having to talk to our departments about things that go into our syllabus. As an emotional intelligence committee, we've also discussed having Zoom protocol for campus wide. And so I think maybe this is a great opportunity for us as a staff to then create a clause or a thing that is in every single one of our syllabi. We talk about it in the first day when parents are checking in with us, and we're not going to accept comments. We're not going to accept names that are changed that are certain derogatory or anything like that. and then have an open conversation about why we're having this in our syllabus. And if anything comes up, we can always refer back to that. And that's a baseline for anything that's coming up. So I think we need to have in our syllabus, as well as just like maybe even just opening up, because I believe that most everybody knows the BLM movement right now, as well as everything that's been going on during the COVID closure. Everyone has to be anti-racist. It can't be one or two people on campus. We all, like students, staff, every single person needs to be a part of this. Otherwise, it's going to continue the way it is.
Okay, so I think that's all that we have right now. If you do have anything to say, you can still raise your hand, but I think it's time to move on if that's okay with Abby.
Sorry, I just have one more thing to say. I can't use the raise hand feature, so I think I'll just speak at the end here. Yeah, so I'd actually like to maybe give everyone an instance as to something I thought worked at Washington High School. So I remember learning from the MSJ open letter that a non-African American teacher permitted students to use the N-word when reading Huckleberry Finn. And I was just really shocked because when we read it at Washington, the approach to this sensitive topic was very respectful and it was very educational. For example, our teacher addressed how this topic could be sensitive, and then she showed us videos of African American teachers and community members debating both sides of whether the book should be taught in schools. So we learned about how for some people, hearing or seeing that word can feel demeaning and offensive, but others want to educate students on the troublesome roots of the word so they can understand why it's so offensive. So I thought that approaches like these very, very beneficial to students so that they understand both perspectives and both sides can feel heard in the situation. And I just thought that was one aspect of a very respectful and inclusive approach to teaching. And that was Miss Jones in her English class. This is just one English class. I'm not sure if they do it in others, but I'd highly recommend it. And this could be used as an example for, teaching history or math as well. So I thought that was just one instance I would highlight here that I just thought was very commendable and could be used in the future as an example. Before we move on, does anyone else have anything else to say? Okay, great. With that, we're going to be moving on to political matters.
Okay, so here are some comments referring to discrimination against their political views. So this is by a student who's a 12th grader. As a student at Washington High School, I have seen the effects of political polarization and identity politics play out here on campus and the disastrous consequences of them. As a proud American and Washington student, it hurts me to see staff and mostly students discredit experience and input based on one's background or skin color. In a history class, for example, my input about what Chinese American hardships were and why they happened were discredited by most students and labeled as bigoted and racist because it upset other students' feelings. At the time, we were being taught about hardships that Black and Indigenous people faced here in America, and I felt as it was my responsibility as an Asian American student to express to my fellow students that these groups and cultures were not the only groups that face racism and prejudice here. I do not believe that being taught in that one group's hardships outweighs those of other marginalized groups is appropriate. I woke up to the next day to rude messages on social media calling me racial slurs based on my ethnicity and mixed race origins. I was also called a race traitor, whitewashed, looking for white approval, and even an Asian supremacist. I also got messages saying that my people shouldn't be thinking like that and that I should vote and think like my people are supposed to do. This is all that happened even though I am half Chinese and I have mixed European descent. I shook it off because I did not care since words are just that, words. I wasn't going to let those labels stick, and my father taught me to not give in to the bullies and fight back. So I fought back by going in the next day and doing what I always do and showing them that I wasn't bothered by their words. Throughout the day, rumors spread that I was a closeted racist, and at lunch, I got airdropped a picture of a note that said, "You, insert Chinese slur, won't be on top for much longer." I thought that I should go to an adult, but I didn't because I was afraid that they would say that I deserved it and that that's what I get for speaking my mind. I find that teachers here are much less likely and willing to help right-leaning students. Some even do it out of their way to shame students for having different political opinions. I've seen how this kind of teaching creates a more radical and polarized teams on campus. Students are not used to hearing other views or take on history or issues and it's only going to get worse in college. I really hope that my story will help admin, staff, and students realize that shaming students for their opinions and input if it doesn't fit your narrative is dangerous and decisive. Thank you. So this comment, we had to delete some of the parts in the comment because it was regarding to a teacher's personal political view, and we felt that it wasn't appropriate for this panel. But this is generally a good tip. I think as a teacher, you should probably leave your political opinions out of your lectures.
All right, so now we'll be moving on to the microaggressions session part of the forum. So our first story comes from a senior last year. And so this teacher has a history of saying racially insensitive things in class, crossing lines with students and using their power as teacher to belittle students. These incidents have been going on since my older sibling, who is now in college, was in their freshman year. To rank students in front of the entire class, make students feel like they didn't stand a chance in his class, insinuate Mexicans only had the capacity to work in fast food restaurants, interrogate a person on their religion because they missed school for it, even though the district was fully aware of this arrangement with the student. They tried a student's food in class and spit it back out into the student's container because they didn't like it. They have a public Instagram account that several of their students follow and use to interact with them on their posts. They picked up a student before and put them in a trash can as a joke. They have gotten away with so much for so long, and there are many alumni that have witnessed this behavior as well, as students currently at Washington. They are a very popular teacher and has been protected because of this. But many of these things happened and are undeniable. Even his favorite students can't lie that these things happened. At the end of the day, it is the adult's job to take responsibility for their actions and face the consequences. All right, and so our second story is also from another senior. And so, though I've had a number of good experiences, there have been also a number of bad experiences at Washington High School that I would like to address. The first one would be about one of my teachers. They have repeatedly called out students on factors such as race, religion, and academics. My personal experiences would be having my religious identity being called out in front of my classmates and being questioned on my personal beliefs, though they were approved by the district and school itself. I have also seen them belittling cultures, races of students, such as a student's ethnic culture being compared to something as trivial as a Disney movie. The second issue I would like to address is the limited understanding of mental health in students. Many teachers do not understand nor respect the effects of mental health disorders in the students. So there is no quote unquote safe space created for them to be comfortable enough to go there. I myself have a mental health disorder which heavily influences my life as a student, and the effects of it are worst when teachers do not understand the influence it can have, such as not being able to attend a class or not being able to answer a question when called upon. This also affects our overall performance in class and makes it harder for us to do well. I had missed a test before quarantine because I was having a mental health emergency. My teacher decided to stop testing after school closure, so because of that, my missed test average stayed low, and I did not receive credit for that class. These are issues that are not well known to the staff and teachers, but they should be. My third issue would be the lack of help by school counselors. After my counselor from last year was changed, I have felt like the counselors are lacking in their abilities to help students in many situations, one of them being the type of situations as shown above. I am hoping that they will be more available and helpful in the future. I also hope many of these issues will be solved for the next academic school year. So this is our next story. This teacher has continually been racist and participates in microaggressions against Washington high school students. This teacher has spit in students' food and has only given one lousy apology. Is that the price to pay in order to do that? By letting this teacher still be employed, by not giving actual punishment, you are saying that you are okay with this. You are saying that type of stuff is acceptable. There should be zero tolerance. This teacher is not a good teacher. They belittle, talk down to Mexican students, and feel threatened by any students who come to them with a simple request. By displaying this mask of actually caring for Washington high school students, it only gives us a false sense of security. If nothing is going to happen, just say nothing is going to happen. There needs to be more transparency between the staff at Washington and the students. And then our next story also comes from a student with no grade level provided. So this teacher needs to be reprimanded. There needs to be severe changes to his attitude and demeanor, especially in the way he treats his students. The main problem is his entitlement and inflated ego. 90% of his students are afraid to ask for help/questions because of his techniques of teaching, which includes but is not limited to belittling, yelling, there's accusations of not paying attention, and straight up apathy. It's disgusting how they treat some students with such little respect, but others with such blatant favoritism. There should be no fear in a classroom ever. They ask for constructive criticism, and the moment they get it, they become incredibly defensive. This isn't a secret either. Everyone at Washington knows their style is rudeness, but we all put up with it. For what? I'm tired of not being able to ask questions. I'm tired of being in a class I dread. There needs to be an obvious change. So now we'll move on to a discussion addressing the previous two sections of the forum. And so.
Yep. So our discussion question will be, how can we prevent and reduce instances of overreach and microaggressions in the classroom? So some things to think about are that, what do these stories have in common, right? And, really just think about this, take 15 to 30 seconds and raise your hand when you're ready. And if you don't mind, I would actually like to go first on this one, just because I can't raise my hand. So I think a good first step, and Mr. Moran brought this up earlier, is just to show every teacher at Washington this panel. And I think that that can go a long way. I think a lot of the time, not everyone knows when they've crossed a line, and maybe they'll realize that one of these instances apply to them if they're able to see this panel. So I think that that's a great suggestion, and I hope that we'll be able to distribute this video to the staff in the future and be able to educate them on what's going on in the community as a whole.
Mr. Moran. You're on mute, Mr. Moran.
Sorry about that. So I think the first thing that kind of comes across to me is that we need to do a better job creating an environment where kids feel safe to come to adults and speak to them about things. And I 100% believe that kids want to speak to adults about things, but they don't feel comfortable doing that. And we have some work to do with that. And I think we say it a lot. We say, don't be afraid to come speak to us. But saying and our actions are kind of different, I think. And on a day-to-day basis, are we making ourselves available to students so that they feel comfortable coming up to us, right? With anything, really, right? Because they got to be comfortable coming up, talking about something positive, as well as something that didn't work out as well as they had hoped, right? So I think that's something that we need to address as a culture. And then I do think that we need more stories and more examples for staff on what microaggressions really are, because I don't think people really have an understanding of it and the depth of it, right? And stuff that they probably don't think is offensive, and but when said over and over to somebody in a class, or they hear it repeatedly, it becomes more than a microaggression. It's flat out aggressive. So I think that's another thing we definitely need to work on. Thank you.
Kenny.
Yeah, so listening to those stories, two things really stuck out to me. And so the first one is the long one about political beliefs and stuff. And so I'm sure a lot of people who know me, I'm pretty left leaning, I would say, but I've definitely noticed on social media that there's a lot of negative feelings towards people with different political views than a lot of people, especially in the Bay Area. Generally people with right-leaning views are harassed online, and I think that doesn't help the problem, because what that does is that it shuts down conversations that we can have with these people who have different beliefs with us. And so I think if we want to be able to make changes in the future, we can't be overtly like bullying these people with like opposing views as us. We have to be able to engage them in civil conversations to like, if not change their views, at least understand where they're coming from. That way, like we ourselves have a better understanding of how we can handle people with differing opinions in the future. And so that was just one thing that stuck out to me. Another thing is the problem with mental health. And so I know in like the past, mental health has not been like a focused on point in a lot of circles. And so there is always focus on like your physical health and like PE and stuff, but there's never much talk about your mental health. And I think mental health is equally as important as, if not just as important, equally important, if not more important than like your actual physical health. And I think it's important for all of us like at the district at Washington to be able to take steps to address teaching all of our students and staff how to recognize mental health issues and how to maintain proper mental stability. And I think this also comes down to counselors, because I know in a lot of school districts, counselors view themselves as purely academic counselors, and they don't really try to be the moral support for the students that they are serving. And not saying that that's the case always at Washington, like we have some great counselors here, mine included, but I think it's important for everyone to like, all the counselors and just staff, administration, teachers in general, to understand like the mental health aspect of their job, nurture the students and help them grow in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Ms. Oliphant?
So I know I'm coming new to the district, but in my old district, we did a ton of professional development and training on social emotional learning and building relationships with kids. And those were things that made a big difference, I think, on our campus. Even as a district, we had a mandatory implicit bias training, which is where I learned about microaggressions, which I did not know much about before. And so I think that if you start with staff like professional development and really go back to square one about how really teaching starts with building relationships. And if you build relationships with your students and they trust and respect you, they're going to be better students in your class. They're going to trust you and come to you with personal issues, but also they're going to do your work. They're going to try harder and you're going to get better student results. It all just starts with relationships. So I think building that into our mandatory professional development, which those kind of trainings are really better in person, which I know is obviously not something we can do right now, but I just did a 2-week workshop on social emotional learning all through Zoom, and I got a ton out of it. So there's definitely people out there that will come and do it, or there's trainings, there's things out there that it sounds like the staff would benefit from.
Mr. Bortz?
Hey, first I just wanted to say thank you for Kenneth for saying what I was trying to say earlier, but much more eloquently. So props to you, man. I think, and I kind of just want to build on that, being careful when we're talking about like political ideas, like if you go and talk about something like pronouns and respecting someone's pronouns, I mean, I personally think we should do that, but that does become a political issue for some people, right? And you really have to, I think if we're going to be ethical people, we really have to ask ourselves about what do we have the right to ask people to do, and how do we have the right to ask people to do that? Does that kind of make sense, what I'm trying to say? Maybe? No? Okay, cool. But I like very quickly you run into some ethical gray area where, you know, you become the thought police. And even though like that is how I would like people to think, I don't know if I have the right to tell other people how to think. And I have some other things I want to say if they come up later. I don't want to be that kid who spends the whole class period talking.
Ms. Crosby?
Thank you. To Ms. Oliphant's points, I think that it's a matter of hierarchy of need. And if students don't feel safe and supported, learning can't happen. So you kind of have to start from that position. And I think implicit bias training is a great has great potential. Anyway, I think you have to have the space in education for multiple opinions, and that sometimes means that people are going to say things you disagree with, and you have to have space for that in education as well. And the other piece that I think is really important is something that I've been trying to learn, which is having that space for education to not necessarily be about you. When you speaking specifically to the student who was trying to expand the conversation in a given moment to include others who have felt suppressed and oppressed, there was an opportunity for a teacher to say, I hear what you're saying. That is not the discussion we're having right now, but let's come back to that at a future lesson or a future conversation, because I want to hear from you. But right now we're talking about these individuals and their experience. So we're going to stay on that. I think that that's respectful for the other students who might be in the class who are having conversations that are important to them to be addressed. But then you have to remember to circle back and include that student and allow them to express their concerns, because I think it doesn't feel good when you feel dismissed. The other thing, and I think that that's part of, stepping forward and stepping back, not dominating conversation, but also being willing to step back, which I'm really bad at. So I just put that out there right now. I could be better at it. The other thing, I think some of the really great teaching that happens is when a teacher is looking at the students and doesn't require a student always to raise their hand. Students put questions on their face. If they give you that look of, what was that? I don't get that. And you see that, and then you can draw them out that, okay, I see you look confused. Tell me what you're thinking. What is it? Share with me what that look means. That shows that you have space for questions, and that student doesn't have to actually always raise their hand in order to be recognized as not understanding.
Ms. Ottermani?
Hi, everyone. I wanted to go back onto the idea of, we have these stories from students, so obviously something is happening on campus, and the idea that we want kids to feel safe to share these stories. But with that, I think comes accountability. So how are we holding staff accountable for these interactions that they're having with students? If this is something that's happening over and over again, and we're hearing the same stories about the same person, what's being taken to the next level with that staff member? Is there a meeting that's being held and we're going over what's happening? Is it just being swept under the rug? Are we not believing the students? And then another thing with having more than just 5 people on campus for students to talk to, one thing that I found, a lot of my students didn't even know where the office was, even though it's in the front of the school, or like where to go find the counselors and how to get that help. So even now with distance learning, how are we going to give them those resources? So I think just trying to figure out, how are we going to hold these staff members accountable if these things are happening? Because we need to nip it in the bottom. That's all.
Mr. Speckles?
Hey, so I think I raised my hand when Kenneth was talking, so it was a little while ago, and I don't want to necessarily take us into a time warp, but I do think that what keeps on coming up for me is that it's necessary to have time to do this stuff and to invest time in these kind of conversations, which are challenging for all people, adults and students as well. And I think one of the things we don't always do is teach people how to have a conversation and actually how to listen to other people in a way that's not thinking about yourself and how you're going to respond to that comment or that thing that somebody else said. I think that there are ways of teaching those things and ways of really having great conversations with students as a class But they need to be very thoughtfully done, and those are strategies that we should be implementing as teachers in classrooms. It sounds like, Abby, you mentioned one from one of your classes where there was an opportunity for a deep conversation, but you have to also be willing to be uncomfortable and live with that discomfort. And that often gets pushed away rather quickly by staff members and students, I think. When they become uncomfortable, they want to push that somewhere else. And what's really important is to somehow stay there in that moment with that and then make that an educational experience, that we're not just rushing to the next thing that we have to teach, but that we're teaching people how to be people and how to be positive members of the community. So it's a lot in there, but sorry if that was a little wandery.
No, you bring up good points. Trinity?
So one thing I think we can do is so what I noticed from the stories is that mostly that students don't trust teachers in like expressing their opinions. And I think to build a better like student teacher relationship is for teachers to accept the differences in students and their biodiversity from where they come from and like their political views. And I feel like maybe for like each teacher there could be like a office hours or something. So like there could be like contact info for like one teacher for like one. There can be like contact info for like, for example, like there could be a Gmail that you can use to contact teachers for like school purposes and another just in case they have anything they want to express or talk to you for, so they can build a better relationship and it can be like trustworthy. And also there could maybe be like training for teachers or something for them to like see the situations and how students feel and like see solutions on how they can help the students.
Awesome. Miss Donahue? Miss Donahue, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. I think it's important to hear that of these stories. What I feel the need to reiterate is what Ms. Crosby was saying about when an issue is brought to our attention and we address it, we aren't able to discuss that publicly. And so to students, it may look like, no one has done anything because we can't share it. And if that is indeed an adult's practice, holding people accountable is important, as well as the discussion about educating people. But there's just a lot that goes on that we aren't allowed to share. And as Mr. Bort said, training people out of or changing their hearts and their practices is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And we continue to, try to make the environment better for everyone at Washington, adults and students, everyone.
Ms. Crosby?
Thank you. I'm really grateful for what you just said, because I think that some of when a student feels unheard, it isn't even necessarily that they want to hear back that XYZ happened, but they want to have the trust that something will be done. And I think it's incumbent upon us as adults to have those relationships so that when you say to a student, I've heard you, I'm going to do what I can about this, okay? So that they know they can trust you. They don't need to hear back from you exactly what was done, but they can trust that you took them seriously. So it's taking that time sometimes to make sure that they feel heard. And, that's repeating back what was said and some of those other tools. It's very funny that this conversation about listening, I was literally watching a YouTube before this went on that's about, it's a TED Talk about the ability to listen and have conversations. Anyway, have it in the chat. I'm going to put it to you so that you have availability to listen to it as well. It's really well done. But the other thing I think that I've been really concerned about is that, a lot of our counselors are meant to be academic counselors. they're going to talk to you about your grades, they're going to talk to you about your future, things like that, but they're not really intended. The majority of their job is not meant to be around emotional support. And I think, unfortunately, we don't have enough of those in our district. And I take that to heart, that we're not doing a good enough job supporting our students emotionally. So I appreciate the suggestions about having those other different ways of having students report if they're having difficulty, if they're having challenges, so that we can hear, because I think we want to hear, we want to be there, we want to support our students in a lot of different ways. And so I'm writing notes as we're talking, so I want you to know that. I think you guys have wonderful suggestions. So hopefully we can be doing better.
Mr. Bortz.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. This is kind of totally not in the vein of what we were just talking about, so I'm sorry for throwing a wrench into everything. But I just noticed that we keep talking about like marginalized communities, and I noticed a bunch of these posts were talking specifically about people of Latino descent. And I noticed that all the students in this panel, well, I'm really happy you guys are here. You guys are great. You guys are awesome. All of you, I noticed, I heard like ASB president, ASB vice president, president of a club. And I noticed within this conversation, there aren't a lot of marginalized people. And that if we're gonna actually make an effort to bring everyone together, maybe we need to make more of an effort to go out and find marginalized individuals and bring them into the conversation, or individuals who feel marginalized. Because I'm getting this weird feeling at the moment of like, I'm having a conversation about people who aren't here, if that makes sense. Just something to think about.
Ms. Cheney Aiello.
Okay, so to sort of follow up on what Mr. Bortz said, I think it's very valid that, you know, we really do need to include those people. I know that we have done a group called Pulse, where we've tried to literally get the pulse of the students and tried to incorporate kids from all grades, from all different backgrounds, and that really has been important, and it's harder to do in distance learning, but I agree with you that this conversation needs to go wider. But I do appreciate that all the students who are on this panel were picked to be on this panel because they're ASB officers, and so that's how they were selected for this particular meeting. I have a question I'd like to put out there for students, and I don't know what the answer is. Do you think it would be helpful for them to hear from staff members that are willing, who maybe have experienced some of the things that have come up in this? Do you think that they might be more likely to go to a staff member if they felt like, oh, you've also struggled with mental health and you get it, or you kind of get it? Or, you know, some of those things where sometimes it's easy to see by what people look like, and sometimes you don't know what people have been through. But would that at all be helpful in making students feel more likely to come forward?
Kenny, I see Kenny raise his hand for that.
Yeah, I think that definitely would be like helpful, because by showing students that like their teachers are approachable and they're going through the same issues, like they become more people that like, not like in a set hierarchy where like they're just teaching you, but more on like an equal playing field where like both of you are human and you're both experiencing the same issues. And so I think that will go a really long way in helping students connect with their teachers and being more able to relate with them and to go to them for help.
Sarah.
I originally raised my hand before, but I'll address this issue as well. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. Personally, for me, I do have a teacher that kind of knows the same things that I'm going through, same like mental health and stuff like that. So it's really easy for me to go to him and talk to him. And I feel really trusted when I talk to this teacher. The reason I originally raised my hand though was I wanted to bring up an issue that actually, it was kind of like an instance in my US history class this year, which I thought is a really good example of how we can be respectful of other people's political views while also educating people about what's happening and what has happened in the past. So in my history class, we would often learn about like different wars, World War II, the Vietnam War, but my teacher would leave it very open-ended. So she would often ask us, how do we feel about this? And she wouldn't try to push us to think a certain way, which I think is a very good example of how we can be respectful of other people. And even during the end of the year, I thought that something that we did really well in that class was that she taught us things that wasn't exactly in the curriculum. So about like LGBTQ rights, female rights, feminism, which I thought was really good, but she did it in a way that wasn't pushing her own opinions or a political view on it. So I think that's a really good example of what we can take into account into going into teaching next year.
Also, to answer Cheney Ayala's original question too, I think it would definitely be very beneficial for teachers with similar experiences to talk to students. At least from personal experiences, when I've opened up to a teacher, I felt very comfortable with them because they're very open and they're very open to conversations. I find that like many different teachers, and also I've seen a common theme in these public comments is that a lot of students are not open to talking to teachers because they instigate fear in them, which I think it's a very bad way of learning, especially because as teachers, we should all be in a collaborative environment. And sometimes it really doesn't feel that way, especially when you're imposing in a lot of stricter rules and when you're making like rude comments when a student brings up a point. I think it just instigates more fear into the student body and they're less likely to talk to teachers. So I think it would be really nice if we can have more teachers who are more comfortable with their students and also just more willing to listen to students' points and just be aware of where the students are coming from. Is there any other students that also want to answer Ms. Cheney Ayala's question? If not, I'll just move on. Ms. Crosby.
I wanted to respond to what you just said, which I think those are really good points. And I think it's also very important for any adult who is having a conversation with the students about mental health issues to then circle back with them later. I think it is not uncommon for students to feel secure in a moment, giving how they're feeling, and then later feel like, oh my gosh, why did I speak up? How is it going to be taken? What are they going to think of me? All those kinds of things. So circling back and making sure that that student is still okay later, or if things have improved or gotten worse for them. So I think that those are really important strategies that we need to make sure that we keep in mind. To Mr. Borse's point, I think it's really important that you are all involved in ASB, and I'm super grateful for this forum and your advocacy. And I think you're doing a wonderful job. However, I think there are students who never find a place in leadership. They don't see themselves in those roles. So we frequently, I know I have two daughters who graduated from Washington and one who was part of leadership and was very involved with it. And I know it's highly desirable, and there's a history of leadership being a really super place to be involved in Washington High School. My problem with leadership in our district as a whole is that frequently we put up bars to who can be involved in leadership. Sometimes it's about GPA, and there are students who don't have opportunities to take some of the outside tutoring, or maybe they have to work a job because they have, financial needs at home. And it's put as a bar against them being part of leadership. They may have very good leadership skills, but they don't get to see themselves in that role because of a financial or an academic reason, where if we allowed them into that space, one, it may improve their academics because they now feel invested in a school in the way they haven't before. But also the reason that's given is, well, if your academics are suffering, then you won't have time. Whereas we have very, very high performing students who have a lot of really demanding coursework, but we count on them to be able to get that work done and still be in leadership. So I would like to see us do a better job of opening up leadership. And I don't mean just at Washington, but across the district, for, you know, our Latinx students, our Black students to feel and find a place where they too can be seen as leaders, because, you know, I believe they have those capabilities and they should be seen in those spaces, and they should recognize that they too belong there. So I think we need to be doing a better job. Thank you.
Ms. Chaney Aiello, I saw your hand first.
First, I just want to thank all of the students for responding. Based on your responses, I'm going to go ahead and put myself out there and say, I have personally had a lot of experience with mental health concerns, not volunteering to be anybody's counselor, but I just want to put it out there that you can do okay, but it is important to reach out. So if there are kids out there who feel like they need to reach out, please, if you're watching this, do that.
Mr. Lowe.
Okay, hi. This is Gordon. I'm the DCS PTSA president. So I was listening to all these discussion. So there's a couple of points I want to make. First is one of the discussion was to share the information from this student panel to the teachers and the facility. And also, I think we should share this information to the parents also, because sometimes, like I have one graduate student from Washington and then one junior in Washington right now. I don't hear these incidents at school, so maybe we can present this information to the parents so they can know about it and then be aware. So could be a channel for the student to talk to the parents about if they have nobody to talk to at school. Another point is all these incidents from the student point of view. Maybe we can have the teachers present some of the incident they had in the past where they handle these different sensitive topics like racism and also mental health issue, how they handle it, and then what was the result. So maybe we can hear that side of the story also.
That's great. Ms. Chaney Aiello, do you still want to say something? I guess I'll raise my own hand here. I also want to make some points that I've seen that are very beneficial. I really like Ms. Crosby's point about having more Black and Latinx students, especially involved with the student body, especially from attending previous events such as the African American Student Union Forum or just different forums in general. I see the lack of student attendance there, and I think it's really sad to see because they're one of the communities that are most discriminated against. And I think what we can do, at least like as leadership can do, like how they promote, events such as like dances or Spirit Week, I think it would be really nice if they can start promoting those kinds of events as well, such as like the smaller forums that go on within our student body, because I think they're very beneficial to attend. I attended one forum, I think it was last year, and it was about how many students felt homophobic experiences at Washington. And it was really eye-opening to see how like these students feel marginalized, but their voices are not being heard. Also, another note that I would like to point out, and I also really like how Kenny brought it up in the point, is about mental health. I think it's not just a Washington thing. I think it's a very universal thing across our district that a lot of students struggle with mental health, especially living in the Bay Area. And especially with me as well, personally, I've struggled with mental health, especially with taking a lot of rigorous courses. And while I do understand that these rigorous courses do take a lot of time and participation, I think it would be really nice if we can encourage teachers to have more collaborative measures, especially for different assignments, because I see that in some classes, a lot of a lot of teachers take this opportunity to, for example, like make group projects or just have more fun activities that are just a lot more collaborative and fun to learn about. And I think it would be really nice if we can start implementing that kind of learning system or learning environment at school. And another thing that I also would like to point out, sorry, this is the last thing, but I really liked Ms. Otterbonny's point too about taking accountability. So from personal experience, I've had my friend, she had a bad incident with a teacher, and she reported it to the counselors, and the counselors said they would reach out to her, or they would come back to her, but they never did. And I think she also did that twice. And I think as of now, what we can do is improve the system of communication between students and counselors and admin in general when we're reporting these stories, which is why I also see a common theme amongst a lot of these comments is that when we report to admin, we typically don't get a response back. And I think it would be really nice to have just a better communication in general. So if there's any other comments, you can just raise your hand now, or we can just move on.
Great. So yeah, just two things from me. First of all, Ms. Cheney Aiello, I'm really glad you shared, and I do think it's a great idea for teachers to reach out and connect with students because they just have such a big impact on our lives, and having a good teacher can really inspire you to do well academically too. And second of all, yes, we are ASB, we were elected by the student body, but I totally agree that we need to reach out to these marginalized students. For example, one teacher brought up inviting GSA, BSU, and the Latinx community. And I think these are things that we personally will keep in mind when we're planning the next panel too. So I'm really glad you guys brought up these great suggestions, and we as students will take them in mind too and hope to improve ourselves and the next panel as well.
I was just wondering if I could just jump in for a minute. I do try to connect with students who I think would be great to join some of the leadership clubs. And I find that they're just absolutely shocked that I would even mention it. Not, happily shocked, but I do see there's so many students that don't see themselves in some of these activities in the clubs. And I think it would be great if the participants themselves can reach out to some of the students who they know would probably do really well. I know as a teacher I can encourage, but I think it would be really meaningful coming from you.
That's great. That's a good idea. Does anyone else have any suggestions, more comments?
I have one more suggestion. I think if we are doing more panels like this, we will definitely invite more communities from different backgrounds, such as from Black and Latinx communities, just because I think it's very important to also hear their voices.
Okay, we'll be moving on to oh yes, Ms. Song.
I just want to kind of, now that we have students in front of us, obviously you guys participated in the Husky activities that we had last year around social emotional learning. Mr. Moran and I have talked at length about kind of what are we to do now in the COVID world. I unfortunately had several students in a very poor mental state because they couldn't see their friends anymore. Obviously, the social aspect of high school is major, and not being able to see your friends every day, interacting with them, and etc. Now that we're going into distance learning, at least for the time being, what resources or what activities, what can we do from the Emotional Intelligence Committee formulate for teachers? What can we create for students that would benefit you guys? Were the activities beneficial? I guess we're also we've never been in a pandemic like this before either. So we're coming in a place of not knowing how to address it and trying to educate ourselves along the way. But unfortunately, we're educating ourselves as you guys are too. So do you have any suggestions on what you think would be beneficial from a student perspective? And then we can kind of jumpstart from there.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question you bring up. And if I think I can answer part of it, first of all, yeah, we're ASB. We plan a lot of events and activities to hopefully make school more fun and more enjoyable for a lot of our students. So I think, we kind of have some similarity there and kind of do similar things. But I think we should meet after this meeting as well. And I think we should schedule a time because I think this is a bigger discussion. And I think that I think both of our groups could work together just because we don't know what we're doing either about planning these events and activities that we usually have. So I do hope we can continue this discussion later as well and talk about how we can deal with students' emotional and mental health and just make sure the school year is still fun. Anyone else from ASB or Jenna want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I really hope we can kickstart these events and still keep continuing like a lot of these discussions, just because I think it's very crucial that these discussions are happening right now, especially from the moments of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's really important that we start opening up more about these issues that are very uncomfortable to talk about, but are still really important to issue.
If I could just add on, sorry, on the emotional intelligence wise, I think that it's very important that we make sure that teachers are aware and conscious of how mental health can really affect a student's participation and their grades right now, especially in this pandemic with being isolated and everything like that. And it's also important that we give students the resources, mental health resources, if they're struggling, and also just like lending them a hand if we need to reach out to them. Some people feel like they aren't being heard. So we should be really personal with them, probably reach out to them. If a teacher maybe could have like a form or something that a student could fill out, like if they're having mental health problems and they can't complete an assignment, or just like explain to a teacher why, or just having a conversation. I think that's a good way that we can combat this.
Ms. Crosby?
Yeah, I was just going to say I really appreciated the question. I think that as a trustee, I'm very concerned about people's emotional health and well-being during this, both for our educators and staff and students. So I hope that if you find some creative solutions and ways we can be addressing these things, that you will share them, because it may be that you come up with a great solution that could be instituted in other schools. So please stay in contact.
Ms. Madrinan?
Yeah, to talk about mental health resources, the counseling team does have a list of resources that we put together with the district office, and we're collaborating on how we can get that out to our students a little better, and that although, you know, you're not too sure, a lot of students are not too sure who they can talk to because of us being academic counselors, we're still a safe place for students to be able to talk to an adult, and if it's way past what we can handle, we definitely connect you to the resources in our district, and I think we can do a better job at that. And I also would like to come up with a way where the counseling department can speak with ASB, with leadership, on what are the needs of the students and what we can do as a counseling office to be of service for you guys.
I'm sorry, I just want to jump in for a minute. Andrea, you've been so helpful with everything that I've ever needed last year. Every time I called, especially in crisis, you've been really helpful and quite amazing. So it's a good opportunity to say this.
Thank you.
So I don't see any hands raised. I think it's appropriate to move on now.
Yeah, so we're going to be moving on to the third and final section, which will be, it's going to be mental health related responses and other responses.
Okay, so the first testimony is from an 11th grader. As a typical teenager, I was having a terrible day. Maybe not just a terrible day, but a terrible week or even a terrible school year. There was only a few minutes left of class, and I was moping around as the teacher was talking about the homework. I didn't pay any attention because it would be posted online anyways. The teacher noticed that I wasn't looking up so they continued to stare and ask, "Are you even here mentally? Where are you in your mind?" and continue to laugh. I wasn't the only one who they would continuously pick at about our emotional state. One day I had a pass for counseling with ASAP written on it, and they made me wait the entire class period. I tried to step out about 5 minutes before class, and they yelled at me saying there was plenty of time left in class, but I just walked away as she continued to yell. Frankly, I should have left at the beginning of class when I got the pass. They never took anyone's mental health seriously and bullied us for it. They didn't understand what it was like to not have our lives together. Shame. But I'm grateful classes are over, so no one has to deal with them. The next is from a 10th grader. There is this classmate in my class that I had a group project with, and I was the only girl in the group. Anytime I would pitch an idea, this classmate would say, "Shut up, woman, go get us food." Or, "When will you know your place as a woman? Your job is to cook, clean, and to have our children. You guys aren't smart, so stop trying to help us." All throughout the school year, this classmate would make sexist comments, and whenever someone would call them out for it, they would say, "Chill out, snowflake, it's just a joke." Another day, this classmate asked someone a question, but they didn't know. So they asked me, and this classmate yelled out, "Shut up. You're only good for..." I'm gonna block that out. I would just like to say, if any woman has ever been spoken to like this, don't listen to them. You're a goddess and you can do whatever you want. And here are a couple of shorter comments. This needs to change. We should never have people scared to share political beliefs because they're worried about getting hurt or even seriously damaged mentally or physically. Taking care of your health is important.
Okay, and this brings us to our final discussion question about how can we improve the mental health of students and teachers on campus. So again, just think about this topic, this question, and raise your hand when you're ready.
Miss Song, raise your hand.
So, sorry, I feel like I'm on a soapbox at this point, but I think that staff have not appropriately been trained yet. I think that we need to take this as an opportunity to really think about how we are addressing students on an online platform and in our classrooms, and providing that space that we keep on saying can only happen when we are appropriately trained before we roll it out to students. I think that we have discussed the potential of doing something like a Husky group where one teacher is in charge of making sure that a group of 10 to 20 students, 10 to 15 students, that's their homeroom teacher, if you will, or point person to kind of just see how they're doing and to check in with them on that sense. But I think staff needs to be trained before we're expecting major change on campus. The red flags, sure, a student hasn't checked in several days this week. What's up with that? Can we talk to parents? Can we do anything like that? So I think the step is staff before anything else.
Mr. Bortz.
Yeah, I just want to, I agree with what Ms. Song said about teacher training, especially like thinking about the emotional intelligence activities we were supposed to do during Husky last year. I think they were great if you happen to know, like from a teacher's point of view, if you happen to know a fair bit about emotional intelligence and like you understand where they're coming from, they were super good. So like, I didn't have, but if I could see where if as a teacher you weren't super familiar with those terms, and it's hard, and kids, I hate to break it to you, but we're just people, man. Like we don't know what's going on a lot of the time, or I certainly don't know what's going on most of the time. And we're just trying to do our best too. So I think there's something to be said for that. I think especially some of the teachers, how do I say this politely, who don't come from the same generation as I do, maybe just don't have as much experience. Like their friends probably aren't throwing those terms around, I would assume, from talking to them. It's just something to think about.
Ms. Cheney Aiello.
One of the things that has come up, I think, throughout this forum is that all of these things, all of these really tough issues that we're talking about need time. And not like, oh, it's going to take us 5 years to get there, but we need time within the day to have these conversations, to have these reflective moments. And I know that many of us, teachers, students, and I'd like to thank Abby for putting into that question, you know, mental health of students and teachers, because I know that many of our staff are really stressed out trying to figure out how to, you know, teach you guys online and take care of their own families too. We need to, I think, give ourselves permission to maybe take those 5 minutes that we don't finish, you know, diagramming this sentence, or we don't necessarily do one more example of photosynthesis, and we take those 5 minutes instead to have these conversations. But it's really hard when we have a lot of pressures. You guys have GPA pressures and testing pressures, and teachers have evaluation and their own, you know, requirements and what have you. So I think that there is a need to recognize that we can't do this work without making space for it, because everybody's plates are already overflowing, and we have to be willing to take something off the plate in order to get this bigger, more important piece a space on the plate. But I think it's worth it.
Ms. Garbarini.
One of the conversations I was part of this summer is talking about having a 5-minute passing break in the classroom, the online classroom, because you guys won't have that experience of moving class to class and seeing people in the hall and talking and checking in. Oh yeah, I always see you when I pass from 3rd to 4th. Taking some time, as Nathania was talking, in the classroom to kind of get to be with each other. That, and I don't know, does that make sense to you guys? Would that be something that you might want to do? Like, okay, we're starting geography, but okay, everybody, as we're getting in and I'm taking attendance and I'm looking around, but you get to interact with each other, not talking about the topic, the classroom, but spending time with each other, like you might be able to do in a physical classroom. Like, we're going to have to invent new ways to do this kind of work that is still on point, not taking away from academics, but adding into the personal part of what you guys are going through and what we're going through. Because we won't have that time either. We won't have that first 5 minutes when everybody comes into class and says, oh, I didn't do the assignment because my dog died last night, or this happened, or can I have more time? We need to find ways to have that kind of time and not necessarily, everybody's going to be okay. If all the academics don't happen from the teacher, you guys may have to figure some of them out. But the 5 minutes kind of getting to be in the room, okay, now we're starting this. It may be very important as we go on. I think that's what I'm doing this year.
Yeah, Kenny has a response to it.
Yeah, so just responding to Ms. Garbarini, I think that would be a great idea, especially in like a virtual community and like a virtual platform. It's important for all of us to like have those opportunities to talk to one another. I just want to go back to Ms. Song's point earlier about having staff receiving mental health training, because I think it's important at the beginning of the year well, not at the beginning of the year, but like for students to have like good mental health. I think it starts with the staff being able to recognize like what's going on in students' lives. Like going back to the previous examples of random like teachers who don't understand students' boundaries and when students are feeling the ways that they are, I think it's important that like teachers receive some form of training in order to recognize those issues. I don't know if this would come from like each school site or from the district itself, but that would be something like as a student that I would really like to see like implemented on Washington, not just at Washington, but like throughout the district as a whole. And yeah.
Oh, Ms. Crosby.
I really appreciate Ms. Garbarini's input. I think that we need to give each other permission to be human and a little grace. I've been trying to remind myself because, you know, I feel the pressures that there are families, that there are teachers and staff who are like, you know, what's going on? When is this going to start? What are the decisions? And so sometimes I feel that pent up pressure as well of we got to get this done. We got to get this done. This is very urgent. This is important. And you when you get into that mindset, you forget the humanity of what we're doing. And this is a people business. It's about interactions. It's about relationships. And sometimes it's incumbent upon an educator to let the guard down with students and say, I'm struggling right now, but I want you to know I'm here for you and I'm going to do the best I can, but I want you to know. So that students then can also say, oh, right, you're a teacher, but you're also a person. And sometimes we all need grace. So I would just say that I was able to sit in on the reopening task force and watch a lot of the conversations that were being had around, you know, thinking through what instruction will look like, thinking through, you know, cleaning sites and can we bring students back or not. And we are in such a complex system and there are so many different little nuances that have to be considered in order for us to be doing this education effectively and safely. So know that there are people who are working very hard to do this right for you as students and that we care and that we're going to be doing our best, but sometimes we also need grace. So.
Mr. Borns.
I had an idea, and it kind of synthesizes what a lot of people were saying. I wonder, from a teacher's point of view, like if you asked me to teach art or English, there's like no way I could ever do it. I would need 15, 20 years of training. And I wonder if it's fair to ask every teacher to be there to help kids with their mental health. Because I know like if you ask just like any of us to teach anything, you know, like if you don't have any background, if you're not good at that, if that's not in your wheelhouse, like how fair is that? So I wonder if it might be, if there's some way, and I'm thinking past like distance learning, maybe if we ever get in the classrooms again. Like I know with Husky periods, and we had that thing with the flex time. If you could have certain teachers that would be like more responsible for IE, and you could make kids go to one of their sessions at some point. I don't know what the logistics of that would look like. I mean, I don't want to give the administrators any more like gray hairs by giving them or me another project to do. But I think it might be wise to think about who would be able to or good at or competent at teaching that, because a one size fits all approach to mental health is, well, at least in my opinion, not a good approach to mental health. You got to have someone who's like really wants to be here and dedicated and good and whatnot.
I saw Miss Song raise her hand.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress. We've talked a lot about just like the anti-racist work. It can't just be a group of like a small group of teachers on campus who feel that way and who are teaching that way. Same with mental health. We all teach students. We all have students in our class who are minorities. We all have students in our class who have disabilities. We all have students in our class who may have mental health like needs. And so at least my feeling and my perspective going into this year specifically, especially as the EI coordinator, it needs to be everybody. And that's why I think we need to be educating all staff. And I know that takes time, and I know that we're all at different levels starting where we're starting off from. But I think that we need to dumb it down is a very poor way to say it, but we need to make it more accessible. And that's on us. You're right. The EI activities, we just assumed like, here's something, teach it. We need to do a better job of being able to spread that information to staff before we spread it to students. But I hear you, I agree, but I think it needs to be everybody. We all have these students in our classes.
Ms. Crosby?
Yeah, I mean, if I can, I agree with both of you. There's nothing worse than having somebody who's really bad at mental health support being the person who's responsible. So there are those of us who have, we all have different skills. So for me, I'm somebody who tends to keep myself awake at night with the worries of the world on my shoulder, thinking, how can I, save starvation in this part of the world? At the same time, I need to make sure we have green supports on I worry about everything. And there's a saying that really helped me, which is, you may not be able to do everything, but you can do something. We can all do something. So if you have in your mind that you're going to help in some way, even if you can't be everything to every student, you can be something to some student. So try to approach it that way and know who the people are you can refer students to if it isn't your strong suit.
Ms. Cheney-Aiello?
Yeah, to echo what Ms. Crosby just said, I'm guessing based on what the students on this panel have said, it sounds like each of you have found at least one adult on campus that you feel like you can go to, which is great. Obviously, we'd like it to be more than one. The advantage of having 6 teachers every year in the secondary is that, you have a chance to make more connections and hopefully find some more people that you feel comfortable working with. One of the things that I'm not sure if the students on this panel are aware of, Ms. Song has been referring to our EI work, and that started a number of years ago. So I don't know if students actually know that we have been trying to train teachers. It's not the same thing as having an entire course in, clinical psychology. But we have brought in people from, I'm gonna totally blank on where Jack is from, Facing History, Facing Ourselves, to work with our English and our social studies teachers and our entire staff a couple of years ago on how to be a little more self-reflective about people who are coming from spaces that maybe aren't the same background as yours. And we have tried to put, student created EI posters around the school with those 6 different sort of EI goals. And they may seem like really small things to those of you who, are in your, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year at Washington, but those of us that have been here starting on our 8th year, we have actively been trying to increase this. It's still not enough, but I just want to make sure the students on this panel know that is not the first time we've had this conversation. We need to keep having this conversation. And I really like the idea of having like ASB and the EI team and the counselors, especially with distance learning. I think that would be a great combination since we're not going to have as many, on-campus student activities. I think that would be a great way to try and keep, kids feel like they get to connect with each other. But I also just want to make sure you guys know that this is actually one of our 3 main goals in our accreditation process, so that your diplomas still mean something. This is one of our 3 goals as a school. So we really, really care about you more than just your academics or your physical health.
Mr. Boards.
I forgot to take my hand down from earlier. My bad.
Okay. Does any students have any opinions on this or any matters they want to discuss? Oh, Mr. Moran.
I know that mine won't be the final words, but I kind of wanted to readdress what I've heard in this panel today. and kind of make sure that I'm not missing anything. Before I do that, I did want to thank everyone for attending this panel on a Friday afternoon and bringing such good energy and such really such wonderful insight into the topics addressed today. And it's why I always, year after year, I feel like the school is continuing to grow and address the issues that, hold it from being as the best possible school that it can be, but if we keep growing and we keep having these kind of conversations and doing this kind of work, we are going to be a better place for kids and for teachers. So this is what I've heard. So I think that one of the first things was we need to normalize holding people accountable for insensitive comments. We need to, I thought this was a good one, need to look at Zoom protocol and talk about correct behavior on Zooms and even address EI and Zoom behavior in our syllabuses. We need to address implicit biases, and that we need to re-emphasize again in our professional development this year that, as Anne said, I think it's a primary necessity to build relationships, even to start the process of educating somebody, that you need to have a relationship there first. We need accountability for teachers, for comments, and we need to somehow make students aware that things are getting taken care of in an appropriate fashion. We need to let the students know where the office is, and by saying that, know who they can talk to. We need to take the time to educate teachers how to have conversations about topics such as racism and homophobia. And I thought this was a good point by Mr. Speckles, and how to listen. And I think that was really good. We need to make our focus groups and our student representatives more representative of our student population as a whole. And I thought that was appropriately addressed in this panel today. I thought that was great. I thought someone else brought up, when you give us, and I really liked it, and all the students today did a really nice job of this. Not only were there words on how we could grow as a staff, but I really appreciated the positive examples. You don't know how much that means in these jobs, to hear good things, that you're doing okay. And when you hear that there's staff really trying hard for kids, I don't know, you don't even know. I mean, it's just like when you hear positive things about yourself, when we hear positive things, it really makes a difference. So I think giving that kind of information to staff is also very beneficial. We need to continue to train teachers on, mental health issues, and we need to make teachers aware that their comments are very powerful, and that comments about mental health need to be dealt with in an appropriate fashion. We need to, and what I thought someone brought up was, we need to, academics, obviously we got to get, we got to address skills, but we need to make learning fun. And we need to look for, and I thought Ms. Garbarini did a nice job with this, and a student brought this up, we need to have opportunities for collaboration and for students to talk to each other, and that we all like to learn, and we choose the things we like to learn, right? And the things that we learn in school sometimes aren't things that we'd naturally be drawn to, but if we make those things fun or something that is engaging, we're going to have a better time with it. And then we need to, I thought there was some good conversations on how do we continue to address how to train staff on EI issues here. And we need to continue to work, Mr. Bortz and Ms. Sangha-Panapachan were both correct. We need to continue to work on how we're delivering our EI instruction here at this school. And thank you very much.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I've just wanted to let you know that this is the third panel that I've attended. I was first at Mission San Jose, and then Irvington, and now Washington High School. And what I'm struck by each time is that while kids do express some of the things that they are not happy about, they take the time to share that with adults, and that you guys as students take time to listen, and the staff here, of course, is invested in their school and their community and wants the very best. High school goes relatively quickly. I know some days it doesn't feel that way, but before you know it, it's over. And it could be very easy for us to go through and not give feedback and not express suggestions to make things better. But when we stop and do that, that I've said it before, that's the essence of what a community is. And a community cares about each other, cares about those that are following, and you guys epitomize that. So, and no one's done that during a pandemic before, like the kids in Fremont. So pretty impressive, and I'm always impressed with the kids in Fremont. So thank you for including me.
Ms. Crosby.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for being invited to participate, and to say how grateful I am to the educators who were on the call, that they were willing to participate and be vulnerable and speak freely about their experience, and the willingness to want to improve what we're doing. I think that's essential, and I'm grateful that you're putting in the time today. And then to the students, I'm so impressed with your leadership and your ownership of your future. It's what's going to make a difference, not only for you, but for a lot of other students. So thank you for that.
Would anybody else like to say anything? So I really like how Mr. Moran also brought up the positive aspects of Washington too, because I feel that I'm very lucky to be at Washington, especially because I feel that there's a lot of diverse environments in Washington, and I have had a lot of positive experiences with teachers. And yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. It really means a lot to talk to everyone and just to gain a lot of input and insight on the issues that are going on.
Yeah, and that brings me to the final slide, which is just future plans and final thoughts. So we want to continue providing students an outlet to share these instances of harassment, discrimination, or any microaggressions. We will continue panels like this in the future, whether it's every semester, every quarter. And we want to share this panel with every other teacher as well. Some of these panels include those teachers, so we want them to be able to understand and recognize some of these stories and learn from them. And overall, we want everyone to learn from these stories and improve our attitude as well as our outlook. So does anyone else have anything to share before we end the meeting?
Oh, you raise your hand.
Go ahead.
Sorry, you got cut off. Did you call my name?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I from another panel that I had the benefit of being part of, one of the things that one of the educators mentioned is that it means a lot to them when they have positive feedback. And I think sometimes the expectation that is, of course, everything's going to be wonderful, and therefore we don't always take the opportunity to say, you know, when you did this, it really made a difference for me and was a good thing. So maybe, and this would be my suggestion to the panel, maybe they consider having a session that's really about complimenting educators as well, because I think that sometimes those ideas then get spread, and, you know, a teacher approached me in this way and it really helped. And then educators have some positive feedback for the work they're doing, but also some other educators may hear, oh, that's a really good idea. Oh, I should have done that. Oh, yeah, I can incorporate that in my class. That's easy, you know? So it might actually build on a lot of positive things. Not that we shouldn't be looking at the things that are not going right, but it gives us an opportunity to also do some of the, you know, bolstering what's going well.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Does ASB or Jen Up have anything else to say?
I would just like to say one more thing. I really just want to thank everybody for being here today. I know it takes a lot of time to come here, especially on a Zoom panel that's like 2 hours long, but it's really nice and rewarding to see that everybody's super engaged in these matters. And I think these matters are really important. And from my experience at Washington, it's been mostly positive. I really love a lot of the faculty members here. They make the environment very welcoming, and obviously there's always room for improvement, but again, I just really like that everybody's here and everybody's engaged.
Perfect. So yeah, just to conclude, thank you everyone for coming. We will follow up, and the next time we meet, we hope to include more views and more people. For every student that is watching this, we are going to continue this panel and this forum, but it'll most likely be with a different link. So everyone has and will continue to have an equal opportunity to share their stories or issues. We'll make sure to get that out to you guys and the corresponding resources. I think a panel about good things teachers do is a great idea. Like some instances for my past teachers have really come to light, and stuff I realize is such a great thing and stuff I would want to share in the future as well. So we'll definitely follow up with you guys on that. In addition to admin and Miss Song, we'll talk to you guys after as well. We're all excited to work towards making Washington the best it can be. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. It was great. Thank you.